This screencast is all about creating electronic surveys using Google Form, sharing the surveys, collecting information, and summarizing the results. So once you're logged into Google Drive, you click the New button and scroll down to More and click Google Forms. It will create an untitled form that you can double-click on the untitled form title and give your survey a name. In this example, I'm going to create a survey about web accessibility. There is an area to provide a form description, and what I recommend is first stating the purpose of your survey and then explaining any terminology that you might use so that everyone has the same understanding of that terminology, and then providing any additional information about the survey and thanking your participants. So in this example, I'm going to tell them that the purpose of this survey is to better understand the perceptions of Internet users regarding web accessibility. And then I'm going to define web accessibility, which refers to the inclusive practice of creating websites so that they are usable by individuals of all abilities, providing individuals with disabilities access without barriers. And then I provide the instruction, please complete the following questions. This survey is for a class project and results will not be published. And then I'll end with a thank you. Thank you so much for your time. So one question is already provided, and you just double click on where it says Untitled Question and you can type in a new question stem. So I'm going to ask a couple of demographic questions. What is your gender? And it automatically saves. I don't have to click anything. I can just add another question by clicking the plus button to the right. And I'll add a couple more demographic questions like, where do you currently live? And since I am at the University of Houston in Texas, I'm going to put Texas as one of the options, but I have a lot of contacts outside of Texas. So I might want to know if there's any difference between what respondents say within Texas and what my contacts outside of Texas might say, or maybe respondents that are outside of the US. So if I added additional options and I didn't want a particular option like outer space, that maybe not be one of my legitimate options, so I can click the X button beside that option and it goes away. I can also reorder the options by clicking on the left side of the question, and as I move my cursor there, a crosshairs appears, so I might want to reorder the options of male and female in my gender question if I choose to do that. So I should probably also ask if the respondent has a disability. Maybe it would be interesting to compare respondents who have a disability and those that don't. The perceptions of how accessible the web is would likely be related to that. So those are a couple of questions that would use the multiple choice format, I'm going to show you another question type called a rating scale. So a question that might work with a rating scale is, how accessible do you think the web in general is to individuals with disabilities? So to change the question type, I move my cursor to the right and I click the drop down where it says multiple choice, and I click the linear scale. The default is a 1 to 5 scale, but I could start at 0 or I could continue on to 10. But 1 to 5 is pretty standard. It's a Likert scale, and that's what I'm going to use. So it gives me the option of having labels, which I highly recommend because that shows your participants what 1 and 5 mean. Otherwise, you might have participants who think accessible, the web being accessible, would be a number 1, and some participants might think a 5 is the web being accessible. So we don't want to have that confusion. So I'm going to put the labels in of mostly inaccessible for the 1 and mostly accessible for the 5. On all of these questions, I have a couple of options at the bottom. If you have similar questions, instead of retyping, you can duplicate that question. If you want to get rid of a question, you can click the delete. If you want to make that question required, there is a slider that you can click or unclick. I can do another rating scale type of question. Maybe I want to ask, how often do you think about web accessibility when you are using the internet? Just change that to linear scale, and again I'll label 1 being never, 5 being very often. So that's the linear scale and the multiple choice type of question. There are some open response questions as well. So let me show you how to do that. Perhaps a question that would go with my survey is to describe a time when you found a website to not be accessible. And I can change that to either short answer, which would give me a short answer text box, or a paragraph, which is a longer answer, so that gives them more space to write their response. So as I look through my questions, I want to have a sensible order of my questions. I'm going to start with the demographic questions. Maybe I am interested with whether or not they have a disability, and I want to move that one closer to the top. So there is an area in the middle. As I move my cursor, it changes to crosshairs. It allows me to click and drag and move that to reorder the question. As I look at some of the other questions, maybe I want to ask them how often they think about it before I ask them if they think that it's inaccessible. So I just click and drag it up. The rest of the questions seem to be in a sensible order, so I think that I'm done with entering my question information. I want to show you a couple of other features and things that you can modify about your survey. If you want to change the name of the form in your Google Drive, you just click on the title and it'll automatically update to whatever title you gave to the survey. You can change the color palette by selecting a different color, a solid color, or by choosing a theme by clicking on what looks like an image. You click color palette and then click that image button, and they're organized by different categories. And you can choose any of these that you think corresponds to the theme of your survey. So I'll choose one, click select, and it will apply it. And this is not actually what my participants would see. I'm looking at this survey from the editing view. If I want to see what the participants will see, I can click what looks like an eye. It's the preview button. And this is what my participants see. So it's a bit cleaner view. I'm going to close out of that and go back to the edit view. And then there's what looks like a gear. These are the settings. So you can change some things about your survey, like requiring a login, changing the confirmation page, which is what shows when your participants have completed the survey. So the default will be your response has been recorded. Maybe I want to put something that is more of what I would say. So thank you for taking the time to complete this survey. Your responses have been submitted. You can provide respondents with a link to submit another response, to edit their response, or to even see a summary of the responses. And there are some options about how it's presented. So you can have a progress bar if you have multiple sections, and you can even have the questions shuffled. So I'll click Save to save that confirmation page message. There's a few other options, adding some more text, title and description, adding an image, adding a video, adding sections. So that's up to you if you want to do that for your survey. The Responses tab shows me the responses for the survey. It has a slider where I can click on it and stop people from responding to the survey. So when I'm done collecting the data, I might click that slider and not accept any more responses. But you'll want to make sure that it is accepting responses when you are wanting to collect the data. I also need to choose where the responses are going to be stored. So if I click that spreadsheet icon, I can either create a new spreadsheet and it will automatically give me a title of the name of my survey with responses in parentheses, or I can select an existing spreadsheet if this is some more data to an existing study that I'm already looking into. I might want to just have these responses added into an existing spreadsheet. But I'm going to create a new spreadsheet, and it's going to be called Web Accessibility Survey with responses in parentheses. It automatically creates that spreadsheet and links to it. And if I go to my Google Drive, I can see both Web Accessibility Survey responses, and this icon, this green icon, is the Google Sheet, which is where the responses are stored, and this purple icon is the Google Form. If I want to share my survey, I click the Send button, and it gives me options to send via email, to get the link to it, and I can copy that link, or I can use the shortened URL and get the goo.gl shortened URL. That would be easier to share. I can just click the copy button, or I can share via social media. We've got Google+, Facebook, and Twitter already embedded. Another option is to view the survey and then just copy the URL from the view. Now make sure you copy the view URL as opposed to the edit when you are wanting to share the actual survey and collect data. So to show you what it looks like to have some data from a survey, I'm going to complete my own survey a couple of times. So let's say my first respondent is female, does not have a disability, lives in Texas, actually thinks about web accessibility somewhat, thinks that the web is pretty accessible, but maybe there was a time when they were accessing Blackboard through my cell phone. It did not load properly. And I click Submit. So here is that confirmation page with the text that I added. I'm going to submit another response. This time I'll be male. Yes, I have a disability. I live outside of the US. I think about accessibility a lot. I think it's somewhat accessible. And let's say I use a communication device to access the internet. Sometimes more graphical content does not load well with my device. And I click Submit. And so I could add more data, but I think that's sufficient. So now looking at my Responses tab, it automatically summarizes the responses that I've gotten. I can see I've got 2 responses. I can look at the individual responses. So here's the first one, and so the female is marked, no is marked, Texas was marked, etc. And then I can scroll to the second one. I can delete a response from this view, or I can actually print it. Looking back at the summary, I can see that half of my respondents are male, half are female, half live in Texas, half live outside of the US, half have a disability, half don't. They think the web is somewhat accessible, 3 to 4 out of a scale of 5. One thinks about web accessibility at about a 3, and one thinks about it very often. And then here are my open response. I want to show you how you can access this summary from the spreadsheet view. So this is that same information just in the spreadsheet. So it's got the timestamp, the responses with the questions at the top. So if I scroll to the right, you can see the entire open response questions at the end. If I click on Form, I can go to the Edit Form view. If I click on Send Form, that brings up those options about getting the link and sending that form. If I go to Live Form, this is the view of what the participants see when they complete the form. If I go to Show Summary of Responses, that will show me that summary. And it also shows you then when the responses were each day. So we've got 2 responses in this first day. And over time, that data would grow. So I would encourage you to take screenshots of these summaries, or you can actually create your own charts from the data, because this is a Google Sheet. So that is how to create an electronic survey using Google Form, how to share it easily in social media and other online spaces, and how to collect the data and make sense of the data using the summary options.